The U.S. government, they may just shut down next week, but don't worry because Congress is doing all it can to make sure that Ukraine is taken care of on your dime. President Joe Biden asking Congress for an additional $24 billion for Ukraine, bringing the grand total to $135 billion in aid to Ukraine. Typically, all military activities stop unless they're deemed critical to national security during a government shutdown. So, the narrative that they want to send here is that if we help Ukraine and we don't fund them to the tune of $130 billion, our security is at risk because Russia. They're trying to say, hey, if you don't fund Ukraine, then your security is at risk because of Russia, which I find is really interesting because Zelensky did an interview with The Economist just this past week, and he was talking about how a lot of your Ukrainians, they went over to Western Europe and they fled. They're refugees. They sought asylum over in Europe, Western Europe. And then he says this really bizarre thing. He says, yeah, we've got all those Ukrainians there, and that's great. And I'm so grateful to Europe. And he goes, however, if Europe stops funding Ukraine, I don't know what those Ukrainian refugees will do. It's hard telling what they'll do. Is he threatening domestic terrorism there? I don't think our problem is Russia. I think our problem might just be the Ukrainians. If Zelensky's out there saying, oh, I don't know what these Ukrainian refugees will do if I don't get my money, what? The US government, we're subsidizing businesses in Ukraine. I'm talking like a little knit, like a knitting, a woman who's knitting sweaters and she has a small business out of Ukraine. We're subsidizing her business, her small business. The US government has bought fertilizer and seeds for Ukrainian farmers. We're also covering the salaries of 57,000 Ukraine first responders as well as divers. So, as long as it saves one Ukrainian life, though, it's okay, right? As long as the money saves Ukrainian lives. We're not saving lives with that money. We are propping up their government. We are making them the 51st state of the United States. That's essentially what's going on. This is the problem with war. When people say we have to go and defend Ukraine, what they really mean is more money from the United States. It's not defending Ukraine. It just means we're going to pump more money into Ukraine. And you never get to stop paying taxes, but your government, nah, they might get shut down. Okay. You never get to stop paying taxes, but the government might shut down. US officials, they're also investigating, you need to know this, several crimes involving non-military aid and 170, not one, not two, not three, but 170 Ukraine officials, including high ranking military officers that have been charged in corruption cases for crimes that include accepting bribes and embezzlement. So, 170 Ukraine officials are being investigated by US officials for taking the money that we're giving them and embezzling it and accepting bribes. Who benefits? Who's set to benefit from all of this? BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase, because it's also come out now that they're setting up a quote fund of reconstruction. Oh, they're doing that all pro bono. Oh yeah, Kat, they're doing that pro bono. Shut up. They are benefiting from all of this. BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase. It's not that Americans don't like a fight or we're against a fight in any kind of way. Okay, Americans love a good fight. There has to be a fight that is righteous, though, in order for us to get behind it. This is not a righteous fight. I just told you that 170 Ukraine officials are using the money for corruption, embezzlement, bribery. It's not our job. There are no righteous people involved, and this is not our job. Fighting the British, that made sense. We wanted to have a country. World War II, we got involved after Pearl Harbor. Americans aren't against a good fight, but it has to be righteous. $135 billion to Ukraine. Well, what could that money be used for? And I'm not saying we should use the money for this. I'm just saying what it could be used for to build 6 border walls. We could build 6 border walls at the southern border. 6 of them. We could fix Flint, Michigan's water system 215 times over. We could give every single homeless veteran $2 million. $2 million for every single homeless vet here in the United States. We could also provide a $50 million check to every single family in Maui from the Maui wildfires. $135 billion. Good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. I'm live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can see me there. We've got lots to get to. I had to open with that because people are going to be talking about how Matt Gaetz is just so terrible. He's so awful. No, Matt Gaetz is trying to prevent Congress from giving more money to Ukraine yet again. I think it's to the tune of $24 billion. Yep, President Biden asked Congress for an additional $24 billion for Ukraine, and they don't want it. There's Republicans, I think about 7 of them, which is really kind of interesting because there's about 7 true Republicans in the Illinois General Assembly, and there's about 7 true Republicans within the U.S. House. So 7 Republicans, I think, are holding out. Matt Gaetz, he's he's kind of the firebrand behind all of this, and he's trying to say, look, we aren't going to be passing these continuing resolutions. That's what these are. They're spending bills, and he's calling for things like, hey, individual spending. We want individual spending bills. And Kevin McCarthy, that's what you ran on. So we should be getting our individual spending bills, which means, hey, if I'm a member of Congress, I'm not going to get bills anymore. He wants this to be passed. Otherwise, he's not going to bend and he's not going to vote for these continued spending bills. He wants individual spending bills. So when you're a member of Congress, you get a bill in front of you and you're face to face with the decision of starting war in Yemen and voting on a farm bill. Okay, and that's all in the same bill. So it's really tough to make those decisions. Those things don't relate, and he wants to make it to where there's single issue bills. Hey, if we're going to create legislation, it should be legislation that is concise and that addresses one topic, and we don't squeeze in all of this other spending. So Matt Gaetz, he fact checked CNN live on air so hard that they actually had to rush to go to commercial, and I thought it was hilarious, and I'm excited to get to that. Joe Biden's team has been forced to put these new protocols in place to prevent him from falling down in public all the time. So what's really funny is Axios, they did this report on Joe Biden's team and how they're putting these new protocols in place to protect Joe Biden from falling and to prevent him from falling. The second that Axios releases that report, like within the hour, Joe Biden almost took this nasty fall off the stairs of Air Force One. The stairs of Air Force One are significantly shorter than that of what Donald Trump used and every other president before Joe Biden used. Now they're using a shorter staircase for him, and he almost fell down those. Like, it was going to be a nasty fall. Lucky he caught himself on the railing. But then Donald Trump's lawyers, they asked this DC Judge Chutkan to recuse herself. And then they slammed the DOJ's unconstitutional gag order request. They put a gag order on Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why that's unconstitutional here in just a few minutes. There is another government shutdown continuing, like, resolution drama. So they call it a CR. It's a continuing resolution. And what it is, it's just more spending. I mean, I think it was approving $6 billion more for Ukraine. is one of the bills that Matt Gaetz and other Republicans are against. And in that same bill, it approves like $6 billion for U.S. disaster relief or something like that. And Matt Gaetz and company, they're against just voting yes to these continuing resolutions. So there's been a lot of drama, and there's possibly going to be a government shutdown in about a week or so, which people are going to say, that's the most terrible thing to happen in the world. I don't know about that. Government shutting down, I kind of like the sounds of that. So I'd be lying if I were to sit here and say that I really cared about this drama. I really don't, because this is just the way government should act. They should be debating. They should not be coming to easy decisions, and they shouldn't be rubber stamping things. And we've already seen something like this. Remember the House speakership, where at the beginning of this year, where they couldn't come to a decision on the House Speaker, they couldn't come to the decision of Kevin McCarthy. I'm on the side of Matt Gaetz here. If I had the bandwidth to really care about this ongoing drama, I really don't care because, I mean, let's be honest, this is just the way government should function. And here I have it, Chip Roy, when they were fighting it out when it came to the speakership at the beginning of this year. And he says something here, and I want to pay attention to this, because I think that this is just doesn't get talked about enough. There's no issue with government not agreeing. I think government not agreeing, Democrats and Republicans not agreeing on something, is sign of good government. So let's take a listen to Chip Roy.
So this is what the chamber looks like when we're actually debating and the bodies are in the chairs. How many times have we been down here giving speeches and there's not a soul in the chamber? Yet this is what it takes to get 435 people in the chamber and have an actual debate. The American people are watching, and that's a good thing. What we're doing is exercising our rights to vote and have a debate and have a discussion about the future of this country through the decision of choosing a speaker.
So that was through the decision of choosing a speaker. Now we're seeing the same thing kind of play itself out, where we have government disagreeing with each other about these continuing resolutions, a lot of spending bills for Ukraine, and these Republicans are holding out. They're saying, no, we're not going to continue spending in Ukraine. I don't care if Joe Biden comes after me himself, because he can't really run all that fast. And no, but these Republicans, they're holding out. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. And this is democracy, that we're fighting and that we are having a debate with each other. There's nothing wrong with that. But the mainstream is going to sit there and say that Matt Gaetz is a terrible human being because he's holding out. And how could he? He hates democracy, blah, blah, blah. No. This is actual democracy, the actual debating of things. So while I have a lack of bandwidth for the drama that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, I don't have a lack of bandwidth when it comes to just going after CNN. I love going after CNN. I will always have the bandwidth to do that. So Gaetz was interviewed by this woman. Her name is Abby Phillip. Now, Phillip went way too off script way back when she was calling out the teacher union's president in Chicago for sending her kid to private school. So here's what that sounded like. So I actually really liked Abby here in this clip, because she was going after the Chicago Teachers Union president for sending her kid to private school, where, she's like, the Chicago Teachers Union is so against school choice, but yet she gets to enjoy sending her son, to a private school. And Abby actually puts her on blast. Here's Abby Phillip.
Do you think that your rhetoric at some point went too far when you are making a choice, because perhaps, I assume you can afford to do that a lot of Chicago parents don't, because they can't afford it. And proponents of school choice say the state should have a role in helping those families who can't afford it make the same choice that you did for your family.
So a couple of things, Abby. it is nuanced in Chicago. Like I've said, we have been destabilized and defunded in our Black communities. When people speak of choice, they are speaking of two different things that are of comparative nature. What we are faced with in Chicago is an absence of a choice, is an absence of resources. And furthermore, school choice in this country has been anchored to a very racist and angry right wing. I can show you a whole host of emails that have come to me and my family detailing that level of violence and racism. So if the choice movement does want to move away from their angry and violent rhetoric, I might add, then they would do themselves a favor and reject the rhetoric of the right that tells us that history is not important. I understand the impact of segregation in Chicago, the impact of destabilization in Chicago, and I face that along with over 90%
Blah,
of my
blah,
neighbors.
blah, blah, blah. So that's the Chicago Teachers Union president. And the point of me bringing that up is, well, I think that Abby got in trouble. She got in big trouble because she went after the Chicago Teachers Union and she went after the president there. And it was necessary for her to create content to appease the left because she, committed an act of journalism. And God forbid CNN do that. So we have to come out with new content that makes Matt Gaetz look like such an extremist. Okay. So here we go. Let's take a listen to Abby Phillip today. She was totally schooled by Matt Gaetz here on CNN. Here we go.
Week that, or
No, I didn't.
The rule.
That, you're
the,
wrong.
ru-
No,
the rule to
Abby, this is going to be a very embarrassing moment when the internet corrects you on this. I voted for the defense rule both times.
Well, I stand corrected. Congressman, appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should note that you did vote against.
She tries to tell him that he voted against defense appropriations bill or something like that. What Matt Gaetz is against, he's against Ukraine spending. He also is really pushing for these individual spending bills or these individual issue bills. So he says, as a freshman congressman, that he had to deal with um, one of these bills and he had to vote on a farm bill and whether or not to authorize war in Yemen in the same vote. And he's all for these single subject spending bills. And that's actually what McCarthy ran on. Okay. So when he was going for speakership, he said that he was going to push for single subject spending bills, which just makes sense. Why wouldn't we look at single issues and why would we put like two issues in the same bill and vote on two different issues within the same vote? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Gaetz, he is holding up this continuing resolution and not voting for this certain resolution because they're spending for Ukraine in it, and he's sick of it. Like a lot of Americans are, 85% of voters are sick of the spend. They think that we shouldn't be funding the war in Ukraine. I have to take a quick break, but when we come back, you won't believe it. There's actual protocols in place to try to help Joe Biden from falling, to try to prevent him from falling. His team has come up with new protocols. Axios has the story. So I'll be back on the other side. This is The Morning Buzz. See me live in the studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Good morning. Hey, this is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. Gonna get to her comment. If she's so in favor of school choice, then why are they wanting to end the Invest in Kids program? Yes. So, of course, that's the Chicago Teachers Union president. She sends her son to private school, whereas, everybody in Chicago, they're not sending their kids to private school because they can't. There's no such thing as school choice here. And Illinois actually got rid of the Invest in Kids program, which was, I think it was like a tax credit. So it wasn't even really like grant money or anything like that, but it was a tax credit in where students could get money to go to private schools of their choice. So the Invest in Kids Act was actually a great program, but they go after it because they don't make the money. That's the thing, is that they don't get the money. They need the butts in the chairs. And I say this all of the time: homeschool your kids. That's the only way that this is going to get better, because they're against school choice. She isn't in favor of school choice, except when it comes to her kids. She doesn't want you practicing school choice, because then she wouldn't have a job anymore. Okay, she's the Chicago Teachers Union. She's employed by the public schooling system. So, without the public schooling system, and if that were to just be dismantled, which school choice does essentially because it's good, she would no longer be in a job. She would no longer have a whole lot. Like, if you don't put the butts in the chairs, then they're not going to get money. Okay, because the reason why, I mean, I think Chicago public school system gets so much money. It's ridiculous. I forget the exact amounts, but from the state funding, if there's no butts in the chairs. But it's so incredible because they're still getting money despite a lot of children not even showing up to school. The attendance is bad. So yeah, she's not in favor of school choice for anybody else but her. She wants to reap all of the benefits of school choice. Um, that's why they got rid of the Invest in Kids program, because her kid isn't on that program. She has the money to do it. The Invest in Kids program were for less fortunate children, or more needy children, kids who didn't have the money to go to private school. So, what can we do with the $135 billion that we're giving to Ukraine currently? I like I like laying this out, and I'm not saying that we should do all of this, but we could do all of this if we wanted to with the $135 billion. We could build 6 border walls. We could fix Flint, Michigan's water system 215 times over. So we could fix Flint water system 215 times over. We could also provide $2 million to every single homeless vet in America. $2 million each to the single, or to every single homeless vet in America. Then we could also provide $50 million checks to every single family, every single household in Maui, the households that were devastated by the Maui wildfires. $135 billion is a lot of money. And like I said, Americans were for a good fight. We love a good fight, but that fight has to be righteous. And this is not a righteous fight. There are no righteous people involved, and this is not our job. As I said, U.S. officials, they're currently investigating several criminal cases involving non-military aid, and 170 Ukraine officials, including high-ranking military officers that have been charged in corruption cases, crimes like bribery, crimes like embezzlement. So these are bad people. 170 Ukraine officials possibly being charged with embezzlement. So come on, folks. This is not a righteous country. They're not righteous government. These are not righteous people that we are giving our money to. And, we fought the British. That made sense. We wanted to have a country that was a righteous cause. World War II, we got involved after Pearl Harbor. That was a righteous cause. This is not a righteous cause. Okay. The narrative that they want to send is that if we don't help Ukraine, and if we don't fund them to the tune of $130 billion, our security is going to be at risk. Russia, 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 Russia. I was telling you a little bit about Matt Gaetz, how he's holding out. He was on CNN, and it was so funny. CNN had to cut to break because Matt Gaetz schooled Abby Phillip. Abby Phillip, she went off script a while back when it came to the Chicago Teachers Union president, and she actually committed an act of journalism. And she said, "Hey, why do you send your kid to private school, but you're against people in Chicago sending their kids to private school?" The Chicago Teachers Union against the Invest in Kids Act, Democrats against the Invest in Kids Act, which was a tax credit program that allowed less fortunate children to attend something like a private school. Now, her son goes to private school, but she doesn't want your kids to go to private school. That's the Chicago Teachers Union president. So Abby Phillip, she committed an act of journalism and she went after the Chicago Teachers Union. So now she has to repent and create new content to appease the left. So she had Matt Gaetz on and tried to say that he voted against a defense appropriations bill this week. And Matt Gaetz says, nope, that's not true. You're about to look really stupid. I voted for it twice, not once, but twice. So, Abby, this is a very embarrassing moment for you. The internet is correcting you, Matt Gaetz correcting you. Then you guys have to cut to commercial. And as Politico reported, Gaetz even attempted to work with Kevin McCarthy, going into his office with a plan. Politico, they reported that Gaetz had spent the week proving to McCarthy that the speaker could not pass continuing resolution to keep the government temporarily open, no matter how much the speaker refashioned it to appease the hard right. Okay, this is from Politico. Matt Gaetz spent the week proving to McCarthy that the speaker could not pass a continuing resolution to keep the government temporarily open, no matter how much a speaker refashioned it to appease the hard right. So that is a snippet from Politico. And Matt Gaetz, they've already agreed to this this continuing resolution where they keep the government open past October 1st. So he's already kind of conceded, and he's already worked with Kevin McCarthy. The thing that he doesn't want to work with Kevin McCarthy on are these single subject spending bills. He is for these single subject spending bills, and the House has abandoned McCarthy and this continuing resolution strategy, and they've embraced Matt Gaetz's strategy of this single subject spending bills. This is where you take one subject and you vote on one subject. That's what he's for. And McCarthy, when he ran for the speakership, said that he was going to be for these and said that he was going to get this through to where that is the norm of Congress. So when he was a freshman, Matt Gaetz, he had a bill come across the desk, and he had to vote for either this farm bill or he had to vote to not authorize a war in Yemen, all in the same vote. So it was just one bill, and I don't know. We'll have to see how the chaos unfolds in DC. But Matt Gaetz and these other Republicans, what they want to do is ensure that we're not spending all of this money in Ukraine. I think it's like this continuing resolution bill is like $6 billion to Ukraine and then $6 billion in US disaster relief. And he said, look, we don't want to continue spending on the war in Ukraine. So there's also a GOP debate on Wednesday. Each campaign team is making sure, or today is Wednesday, they're making sure that their candidates are equipped to tackle issues like cost of living, to Ukraine, to whether or not a man can be a woman. Biden's team is making sure their candidate is prepared for 24 too. Okay. They're prepared to try to put these protocols in place where they're going to try to prevent Joe Biden from falling. Okay. So there's a debate today. All the other candidates on that debate stage, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to be trying to think about things like cost of living, Ukraine. They're getting prepped on that from their campaign teams. Joe Biden's campaign team, they're trying to work on a way to get him to not fall. I've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about that. Plus, I've got a special guest going to be joining me, and he's from Wire Points. One thing that we have to talk about are the Chicago vacancies. Their offices are all vacant, and there's a couple of reasons for that. wirepoints.org joining me next. This is the Morning Buzz. Good morning. Yes, Bob, you're exactly right. Whatever happened to voting on one bill at a time? So that is what this whole issue is about. Matt Gaetz is pushing for voting on single subject bills, and Kevin McCarthy and the Democrats don't want that. Okay, so Kevin McCarthy, I think that he does want that because he campaigned on it when he was running for the speakership. However, he's not standing strong enough, and he's trying to get them to concede that issue. Um, the Republicans, these 7 holdouts, he's trying to get them to concede that issue, so that way they can move forward with government and things like that. There's a couple of things that they don't want to get passed, so such as the Ukraine spending. I think it was like a total of 6 billion for Ukraine, 6 billion for the United States, and it's all in one bill. And what Matt Gaetz wants, and it's very hard for me to understand all of this because I'm not a congresswoman, right? And really I don't have the bandwidth to really care about all of the Washington D.C. drama. However, I do care about Politico, about the New York Times, about CNN trying to distort all of this and trying to say that this is bad for democracy and that Matt Gaetz is big evil because he is holding out. No, this is actual democracy. Same thing that we saw at the beginning of the year where they were holding out on a speaker. Um, they are holding out on issues like spending in Ukraine. And there's a good reason that these Republicans are holding out on spending more in Ukraine. It's because 85% of the voter base in every single poll that you look at, most people do not like funding the Ukraine war. Okay, the constituency. So there is reasons why the Republicans are holding out on this spending in Ukraine. Um, Now they're not against spending here in the United States. That's not what they're against, but they've squeezed in spending bills for Ukraine in with the US spending bills. And Matt Gaetz said, "Look, no, no, no. We have got to take these and divide them out and do single subject spending bills. Single subject spending bills." And that's what Matt Gaetz says. And for that, the media is demonizing him. They're trying to make it out to be where, Matt Gaetz is going to shut down the government. How dare he? He's such a threat to democracy. No, 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 no. This is actual democracy taking place right before our very eyes. They're fighting. They're not coming to a vote. They're debating about something that I don't know, like should have been debated a long time ago. I can't believe that this isn't a thing. And smash the like button if you didn't know that this was a thing. Where you should be looking at these spending bills one subject at a time. Why are we, having votes on multiple different things that have nothing to do with each other? And Matt Gaetz, he gave the perfect example of, I, as a freshman congressman, was face to face with a bill that had things about farming. It was a farm bill and to increase spending for farming. And then also I had to vote on whether or not we should go to war in Yemen. And he goes, "This was ridiculous. And I can't believe that we don't have single subject voting in the United States. We should have that." And Matt Gaetz is holding out along with these other Republicans. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. When we come back, we're going to be talking about how Joe Biden's campaign straight up has a plan to keep Biden upright. And they needed a plan uh, because he has videos after videos after videos coming out of him falling. Then a little bit later, we will be talking with Wire Points. You're listening to the Morning Buzz. We'll be back in just about 10 seconds. we've been talking a lot about Matt Gaetz this morning, about these holdouts. And folks, I just want to make this clear, and I'm going to continue talking about how the U.S. government is possibly going to shut down next week. And don't freak out. The media is going to try to get you to freak out about that. You don't need to worry about it. It'll be all right. Okay. Congress is doing this because they want to make sure that Ukraine is taken care of on your dime. That's the reason. And make no mistake, it's not Matt Gaetz. It's not these far right extremists in the House that are causing the government shutdowns. No, 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 no. It's because Matt Gaetz is for things called single subject spending bills. And what that does, it looks at a single subject within a bill. You can't squeeze in other things with that spending bill. Currently, there's a continuing resolution. It looks to spend $6 billion in Ukraine and $6 billion on U.S. disaster relief. And they have to vote on that. It's a yes or no vote. And you might be for $6 billion of disaster relief in the United States, spending $6 billion, and you're against spending $6 billion in Ukraine, or vice versa. It's not right that you have to vote yes or no on two different subjects. And Matt Gaetz is saying, look, Kevin, you're the House Speaker, and you ran on single subject spending bills. You said that you were going to make that a thing in the House, and we're going to hold you to that. And they're not bending. And good. I hope that they stay strong, and I hope that these Republicans continue to hold out. President Joe Biden has asked Congress for an additional $24 billion to Ukraine, bringing the total to $135 billion. Typically, all military activities stop unless they're deemed critical to national security during a government shutdown. So, what they're trying to do here, the narrative that they're trying to send, is that if we don't fund Ukraine to the tune of $130 billion, our security here in the United States is at risk because Russia. The U.S. government, we're subsidizing small business in Ukraine. We've bought fertilizer seed for Ukrainian farmers. We've covered the salaries of all of their first responders practically. So, and what's really interesting is Zelensky, he did an interview in The Economist, and I'm going to continue to bring this up because this should be every single headline. Did Zelensky threaten domestic terrorism against Europe? Because he says all these Ukrainians, they went over to Western Europe to seek asylum, and that he's grateful that Western Europe took them in. However, he then says, if Europe stops sending us money, if they don't send us the right amount of money, then I don't know what these Ukrainians are going to do in their country. Terrorism? Is that what you're suggesting there, Zelensky? Joe Biden, we've got all these GOP presidential candidates. They're prepping for their debate tonight. And I don't think that Trump is going to be there. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be at this one. He wasn't at the first one. There's probably another interview somewhere that Trump is going to do that's going to get like 24 million views. Whereas I think that they got maybe 3 million views. I don't know the exact numbers, but the Tucker Carlson and Trump interview had so many views. And Donald Trump Jr. actually went on Fox News and totally roasted them on air and said, yeah, the Tucker Carlson interview got like 24 million views, whereas you guys got like maybe 3 million. But there's a debate tonight, and these presidential candidates, they're going to be prepping for things like issues on cost of living, Ukraine, whether or not a man can be a woman. They're going to be talking about those things. Meanwhile, we've got Joe Biden and his team. They're preparing a plan for Joe Biden not to embarrass himself in public by falling down again. And this is something that he's done over and over again. Joe Biden almost fell yesterday, almost took a nasty fall down Air Force One, but having such a plan to keep Biden upright, and they need to have such a plan because this is the cornerstone of the Biden 2024 campaign. Okay, can we keep Joe Biden upright? And his team is actually bragging about it to corporate media Axios. They've got the scoop here. Biden's team don't let him trip mission. This should tell you all you really need to know. So from Axios, some senior Democrats privately have been frustrated with Joe Biden's advanced team for months, noting that the president often appears not to know which direction to go after he speaks at the podium. Often without context, Republicans have used these video clips of Biden looking confused about where to go after his speeches to raise further questions about his age. So I get that in order to stay a journalismer in the corporate world and to stay a journalismer in good standing, you have to shill for the Biden White House. But it's so silly to blame us Republicans for sharing videos of Joe Biden falling for Joe Biden falling down. Okay. Like there's nobody to blame except Joe Biden being old and he forgets how gravity works. Like I'm not going to stop sharing the videos of Joe Biden falling because they're videos of Joe Biden falling. It's nobody's fault but his own. Well, and really, it's Jill's fault. In order to steal the joy, it brings Republicans to share content Joe Biden embarrassing himself in public. They want to steal the joy that brings me. I love sharing those videos. And I mean, I love it, but I'm also sad about it too. At the same time, his team has a secret mission to prevent these videos from happening. It's not so secret now because it was leaked to the press, and conservatives are now going to seize on the Biden team's having the secret mission to prevent Joe Biden from looking like a complete fool. But yeah, Biden, I mean, I'm gonna go over this. I've gotta take a quick break, but I've got the actual plan here. They've laid it out for us on how they're going to try to keep Joe Biden upright, literally. His team is talking about that. Uh, so I don't know. I'm gonna blame Jill on this one. I think a more effective plan, like all of these things are good, and I'm gonna get to these things, but a more effective plan to keep Joe Biden upright is to keep him at home and to stop the elder abuse of making him run for president yet again in 2024. But then, of course, Joe Biden's team would have to look for new jobs, and we can't have any of that. Good morning. This is The Buzz. I'll be back on the other side. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the Morning Buzz, and I love it. Bob, he says, truth, Biden is being blackmailed because he is compromised with Hunter and the questionable big guy payments. Yes. So another thing too is that I think that Joe Biden, he will not leave the presidency and he's going to continue running. It doesn't matter how bad it gets because he wants to be able to pardon Hunter Biden. Okay, so that's we've kind of like the Democrats. They don't want Joe Biden to run. This is why I think a lot of this Hunter Biden stuff is coming out, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because now Joe Biden is really buckling down and he's like, I am not giving up my presidential power because I want to have the pardoning power for Hunter when it comes to, if it comes down to that. Mark Lennon from .org. Mark Lennon. Mark, can you hear me?
I can, Kat. Thanks for having me
Awesome.
back.
Great. So can you turn down your volume on your laptop? Oh, test. Mark Lennon.
Very good. How's that?
Yes, so much. That's great. That's wonderful. So Mark Lennon, asking you about Chicago and the offices and their vacancies. We're going to be coming back here in just a couple of minutes, and then we'll talk about the offices being vacant in Chicago, and maybe also touch on the Chicago violence as well.
Very good.
Okay, great. Hold on one second. Mark, actually, I'm still getting an echo. Is it
How's this? Better?
testing? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I don't think I'm getting the echo anymore. That's good. Oh wait,
Okay.
nope, there it is.
You got an echo still?
Yeah. Hang on. Testing 1, 2, 3.
I can't hear you now, Kat. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can now, yeah.
Shoot. Trying to figure this out. I know. It's weird. We'll probably have you call. Is that okay, Mark, if you call in?
Sure.
I'll shoot you over via email the phone number.
Very good.
Okay, hold on. Good morning, folks. This is the Morning Buzz, and we'll be back talking with Mark Glennon on the other side here in the 7 o'clock hour. Before we took the break, I was telling you about this proposed plan by the Biden campaign. They want to make sure that he stays upright. So this is literally a plan that they've got and that was leaked to the media. Axios has the report on this. This is a legit plan to try to keep him from falling. Now, Axios titled this Biden's team don't let him trip mission. This is a secret mission to not let him trip. So here it is, the plan. Biden has been doing exercises to improve his balance with a physical therapist. He's actually switched to tennis shoes to avoid slipping. Not sure if they have Velcro instead of laces, but another plan, part of the plan, POTUS, the president of the United States, now uses these short stairs on Air Force One. So it used to be these longer stairs, but uh, now they're using the short stairs. Every other president before him has used the longer stairs to get into Air Force One, but they've changed it to where he's going to be using the short stairs. So he's got tennis shoes, he's got short stairs for Air Force One, and they are doing exercises to improve his balance with his physical therapist. So Joey's doctor recommended balance exercises and called them maintenance maneuvers. What? So I don't know. It's unclear whether those maneuvers are what those maneuvers are, but I can't wait to see Joe Biden attempt to use them in public. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, the most effective plan to keep Joe Biden upright would be, oh, I don't know, let him stay home and stop this elder abuse and trying to drag him out there for yet another presidential run. But, that would mean that the Joe Biden team, the campaign, would have to be looking out for new jobs. And we can't have that because they get paid a ridiculous amount of money and they want their money. So they're going to do what they can to keep Joe Biden out there. We're going to be back on the other side. Mark Glennon joining me from wirepoints.org. That's next. Hey, folks, if you're watching, go ahead and smash that like button. We're going to be back talking with Mark Lennon from wirepoints.org about Chicago and the vacancies that are there. The numbers are quite incredible. So, WirePoint's founder Mark Lennon has a new report that reveals almost a quarter of their commercial real estate loans in Chicago are delinquent or troubled. According to this analysis, they're the worst for troubled loans at 22.7%. Now, that's Denver, Philadelphia, San Francisco are not far behind, but we are the worst when it comes to troubled loans. So the causes are clear: empty office space and soaring interest rates. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we also have another topic. Pritzker has caused this state to be the worst in the nation when it comes to owning a home. So a lot of people in the state of Illinois don't own a home. We are starting to really see that here in McLean County, Bloomington Normal. The housing market is just atrocious. So we are going to be back talking with Mark Lennon. Keep it here. Woo! Hey, did you know that Trump has a gag order? Yes. So he's got to comply with this gag order, and the Trump lawyers have asked this DC judge to recuse herself, but she won't. And now we've got the Trump lawyers slamming this unconstitutional gag order. I want to talk about that. And also, there's something that you need to know in regards to this fellow. I guess I'll just call him that. He's saying that parental rights really anger him, and he's the author of this book, and this book is named one of the most challenged books, one of the most banned books in 2020 or whatever. His name is Alex Gino, and he's this author, and he writes about a trans fourth grader. And it's a very weird book. We're going to get into what Alex Gino said about parents because he's really upset about parents' rights. Parental rights really anchor me, is what he says. He goes, what about human rights? People who are under 18 are human. And if you're keeping information about the world from young people, you're leaving them less prepared to learn how to be in the world, which is really interesting. So we're going to take a look at this really creepy author of this book about a fourth grader being transgender. And he says that parental rights really anger him. And families are pushing back against these books that sexualize children. You've pushed back against it so hard that actually over in Hayworth, a school teacher had to involuntarily resign. So good on the Hayworth parents for showing up. I think it was near 90 parents showed up to that school board meeting and protested against these sexual books being in the classroom for these 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds to read. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about that. But first, Mark Lennon. I'm very excited as concerns about a doom loop evolve over Chicago's struggling commercial real estate market. WirePoint's founder Mark Lennon has a new report that reveals about a quarter of the commercial real estate loans in Chicago are delinquent or troubled. So this analysis, it shows that Chicago is actually the worst when it comes to troubled loans. And I mean, we have a very interesting housing market here in Bloomington Normal. Mark Lennon, thanks so much for joining the program, The Morning Buzz. Are you
Thank
there,
you
Mark?
so much. Yep, I am.
Awesome. So I really just wanted to chat with you about this analysis. So really, Chicago is the worst when it comes to troubled loans. Explain to me why that's a bad thing and why that is.
You bet. Now, these are commercial loans for commercial buildings. We're not talking about homes here. And the report comes from Kroll Bond Rating Agency, which is one of the big bond raters. And the problem primarily is simply the empty office buildings. Currently, the actual occupancy rate, which they measure by looking at swipe card data, people coming in and out, is only 50%, 53% in Chicago. The national average is about 50%. Well, what happens then is the leases, as they come up, people aren't going to renew them. And that creates the value for an office building owner. I mean, it's a direct function of how much lease income they get. So as these leases are coming up, people aren't renewing, obviously, because they don't need the space. It's primarily driven by the work from home trend. And what makes this problem particularly scary is that trend. There's nobody to blame, and there's no obvious solution to it. You can't blame the politicians for that one. Crime, of course, also contributes to it. Interest rates are another factor because this is a multi-trillion-dollar market, and some $1.5 trillion in leases nationally is coming up for renewal over the next 3 years, and rates have tripled, in the last 2 years or so. So we have a dramatic downturn in the value of these projects. Now, why does that matter for ordinary people? Who cares about commercial real estate? Well, the tax valuations, tax appraisals go down accordingly, and that tax burden then has to be spread among everybody else, among homeowners. So, for example, this is a terrible example. The Aon Center, it's a landmark trophy building in Chicago on the lakefront, beautiful white building. Used to be one of the 5 largest buildings in the country. I think it's 95 floors. Its value has dropped by 47% in 3 years. Again, because there's so much empty space in there. Well, we have, in Chicago, like a mile of these buildings densely concentrated, pretty much everywhere from the lakefront over to the expressway. And, Aon building was a Class A building. The real problem is for the Class B and Class C buildings, which will suffer even more because nobody really wants them anymore. And this problem is so large that there's even concern about it being a systemic risk to the country. So the White House and the Federal Reserve Bank are following this because we don't want this to turn out like the home mortgage, fiasco with subprime loans in 2008, where that market was so big that when it sank, it sank the whole economy with it.
Yeah, well, and I like what you said here about the commercial. Why should I care? The commercial real estate loans and them not renewing, that's going to take away from the state's tax revenue. Okay, so that's going to have to be spread to the homeowner. So our property taxes are going to go up because there's such a vacancy going on in Chicago?
Potentially they could. Now, in Chicago, Brandon Johnson has promised not to raise property taxes, but I don't know that he has any other solutions to this problem. He has proposed an increase in the transfer tax. That's kind of peanuts in the big picture. It's like $130 million, which is really not much. So property taxes are the primary means to fund the schools and the city. And where else are you going to get it? We already have almost the highest sales tax rate in the country. That's a secondary source of income. There's not much room there. Mm-hmm. It's a real pickle, and and this is not just Chicago. Chicago is the worst, according to this new poll report. But
I think Normal is up there. If we were to look at the vacancies in Uptown Normal, the office spaces, I wouldn't doubt that we've got a pretty high percentage of vacancies.
Very true. This report only covered the large cities, but it is a problem in many of the smaller cities as well.
Yeah, well, and I do kind of want to shift gears and kind of not really, but the housing. So we're the worst nation in the state to own a home, and I've got to tell you what our Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council guy said. He's the CEO of it. His name is Patrick Hoban. He said homeownership is challenging due to high interest rates, and we're really struggling here because we've got kind of a housing crisis. We've got Rivian here in Bloomington Normal. And we're looking at needing about 9,000 more housing units, but we have been pushing for permits for multifamily housing. So there hasn't been a whole lot of permits granted to single family housing. And the reason for that is because this multifamily housing, it's renting. And there's no single home owner or single family housing anymore that's being really approved. I mean, if anything, it's a very small amount in comparison to the multifamily housing. Tell me a little about Illinois' landscape. Governor J.B. Pritzker promised to cut property taxes in 2020, part of his State of the State speech. Even then, he recognized that those taxes, some of the nation's highest for decades, were a real drag on Illinois homeowners. So, is it property taxes? Is it interest rates? Why are people not wanting to own here in the state of Illinois? Mark Lennon.
Yeah, it's property taxes. We continue to have the second highest property tax rates in the country on average, and across the state. That's the primary problem. Of course, right now, interest rates have again ticked way up for a new home buyer, so that's a major problem. And people are leaving the state, so that that suppresses demand. There are particular markets that are better and some worse. Bloomington Normal may have the demand there because you're lucky enough to have things like the Rivian plant. But generally speaking, and my colleague Ted Dabrowski and John Klinger have a wonderful new article up today on this at wirepoints.org, looking retrospectively that our home appreciation here has been the worst in the country. There's ratings for how many counties have at-risk properties. We have a large number of them in Illinois. 12 of the top 50 property markets at risk of a downturn are counties in Illinois, and it hasn't been a good investment for most people, and for the most part across the state, it doesn't appear to be getting any better. Now, nothing is going on to relieve the property tax burden. Pritzker had a commission on that. It was a joke. They came up with nothing. So this is, again, a problem that's simply not being addressed.
Yeah, and I don't know. Illinois falls dead last nationally when it comes to home value appreciation since 2000. That's worse than Michigan, which suffered the Detroit bankruptcy. So property taxes are a big reason for that. And I know that here in Bloomington Normal, I think the average price of a home, and it's just ungodly, right? It's like $300,000. Like, don't even think about coming to Bloomington Normal if you don't have $300,000 to spend on a home. And that home will likely be 2 bed, 2 bath, something like that, right? So, I mean, the housing prices are ridiculous. And then you look at the interest rates on top of that, then the property taxes. It's just, there's no incentive to move to the state of Illinois. Mark, I have got to take a quick break. But before we do that, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And if you heard anything about this is totally out of thin air. I saw that Illinois is one of these states that are looking to abandon the American Library Association. So coming up, we are going to be talking about these banned books, and this Alex Gino, he's some guy who authored this really strange book, and a few libraries and a few states have taken it off of their shelves. But state libraries in Montana, Missouri, and Texas, and local libraries in Midland, Texas, have announced that they're going to be leaving the American Library Association, with at least 9 other states. So that's Arizona, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Wyoming. They're demanding similar action. So they're demanding that hey, American Library Association, you better change up what you're pushing, the sexualization of kids. They recently elected a self-described Marxist lesbian to lead the organization, the American Library Association. Have you heard of people wanting to leave the American Library Association in the state of Illinois? And do you know whose decision that would be?
Yeah, you're darn right. I have that. That's the. It's not going to happen because it would have to be done by statute. That the General Assembly would have to agree, and Pritzker would have to sign off on it. And they're going around and bragging about that new so-called ban on book bans. I've written about this. It's a farce. It delegated control over which books get banned to the American Library Association. And obviously, that was a horrible thing to do. It's a radical group. It is headed by a woman who's openly Marxist. She was at the big socialist conference in Chicago 2 weeks ago. And the ban really is not a ban at all, except insofar as it allows libraries to work in accordance with what the American Library Association says, and that's the last thing you'd want to do. So you can find that article on our site from a couple months ago. But Pritzker's getting away with murder on this because he's bragging about this, and other states, liberal states, are considering emulating it. And the statute is a joke. It should never have been passed. I don't see any chance that it's going to get fixed, though.
Interesting. Yeah. So it would be where our libraries have to kind of bend the knee to what the American Library Association wants from them, right?
That's one of their options. Yeah, that's one of their options. They can adopt their own code, or they can use the code from the American Library Association, which is wide open. And, they can change that at any time. So we've essentially delegated out legislative power at the option of the library to the American Library Association. If they don't take that option, well, there's no standards at all in the statute for what they can do. So they didn't really address the issue at all. It's a farce.
Interesting. Well, I didn't know all of that, and I saw Illinois was a part of this, and I'll have to read the article at wirepoints.org. Mark Glennon, thanks so much for joining me here. I so do appreciate it. Folks, Mark Glennon, he's an attorney with a financial background, and he has been able to provide some insight here on the Morning Buzz about the Chicago real estate market and why other metro and mid-metro areas should pay attention to the dynamic in Chicago, because folks, you're going to be footing the bill here because the commercial real estate is just so atrocious in Chicago. Mark, you have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Kat. Take care.
All right, folks, we're going to be coming back talking a little bit more about the ALA, the American Library Association, and that story that Mark and I kind of discussed briefly. You can see me live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's Kat Peterson 929. So Donald Trump's lawyers, they are urging this judge, her name is Tanya Chutkan, and they're urging her to get rid of this gag order. Okay, so originally they had said, hey, we want you to recuse yourself because of the comments that you've made about the former president in the past. And January 6th, but special counsel Jack Smith dismissed that concern entirely. She is a complete leftist and she's gone after Donald Trump in the past, and she refuses to recuse herself. But now they've got a gag order against President Donald Trump. So DC prosecutors are trying to unconstitutionally silence him, and they want to bar Trump from speaking out against witnesses, lawyers, and anyone involved in this federal 2020 election case, the case that Jack Smith has pushed against Donald Trump. So the prosecution may not like President Donald Trump's very valid criticism. This is from Judge Chutkan. But neither it nor the court are the filter for what the public may hear, his attorneys wrote to Chutkan. So they might not like Donald Trump, but this is very clearly like you have to be down the middle. You cannot be biased in any kind of way if you're a judge, and they're pointing that out, these attorneys. If the prosecution wishes to avoid criticism for abusing its power, the solution is simple: stop abusing its power. The Constitution allows no alternative. They went on to refer to the proposed gag order as nothing more than a desperate attempt or effort to censor. This is censorship. So, yes, the Trump team accused the prosecution of trying to poison President Trump's defense. You can't put a gag order on there. That's so unconstitutional. It's ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about? He can't talk. He can't speak out against these witnesses or these lawyers who have abused their power and have waged. I mean, in Jack Smith's very own indictment, he says that there is nothing against Donald Trump from going out there and claiming election fraud. There's nothing against coming out and saying that. He has the free speech to do that. So, what are you indicting him for then, Jack Smith? If you say in your indictment that Donald Trump was allowed to say that the 2020 election was stolen, what are you indicting him for? The Trump team accused the prosecution of trying to poison President Donald Trump's defense, slamming them for asking the court to take this extraordinary step of stripping President Trump of his First Amendment freedoms. Really, that's what this is. They're stripping him of his First Amendment freedoms. It's no different than the Attorney General in Texas. They placed a gag order on him so that way he couldn't build a defense. Prosecutors claim that Trump has repeatedly posted false and inflammatory statements. There's nothing against that. You can post false and inflammatory statements. Okay, there's nothing illegal about that. About Chutkan, the judge, and members of the government's legal team on social media. However, Trump's attorneys said that there's no evidence anything he said actually intimidated anyone. So they can be false, they can be inflammatory. He can't intimidate people because that's like threatening. But there's nothing in his Truth Social posts that are intimidating. He's just calling them out for what they're doing. So Chutkan has set Trump's trial date, and this is important, March 4th, 2024. And why is that important? Well, it's the day before Super Tuesday, an important date for the Republican primary race. I don't think that that's a coinky dink. Okay, there are no curious coincidences. This is clear election interference, and he is vowed to appeal the decision in hopes of trying to get that trial date moved back. But yeah, they're trying to gag him, this gag order. They're trying to strip away his First Amendment rights. Good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. You can see me live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Cap Peterson 929 on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are going to be chatting a little bit about this Alex Gino guy, and I want to take a quick break. I got to get to this good news story, though. I like squeezing these in here around this time. A good news story, and then coming up in about 10 minutes, parental rights are really, really a touchy issue for this guy. His name is Alex Gino. He's this really creepy author of this book about a fourth grader. And he said that parental rights really anger me. And these families who are, he said that about these families who are pushing back against these books that sexualize children. He's a big weirdo. Alex Gino. He shared his degenerate views on on parents' role in affirming their children and voiced anger towards parents who stand in the way of children who identify as non-binary or transgender. So we're going to get to this guy because I think it's very important that you know that there are people out there that exist that have platforms, big platforms. This Alex Gino fellow was interviewed by a few news outlets, Yahoo News, and his ideas are being elevated. And you need to know that this is happening all across the country. People with positions of power are advocating for children to be sexualized and for parents to not be a part of their kids' lives at all. So we're going to be back real quick. Here's a good news story for you. I like pulling these out. It's a Wednesday morning, 7:33 a.m. Students attending Virginia Commonwealth University now have access to a new scholarship to help them study abroad. The scholarship is called the L&L Friendship Fund, and it was set up by an anonymous alumni of the university who actually donated $2.5 million, which is crazy. But the plan is to offer 21 scholarships this year to students who may not be able to study abroad or otherwise. So this is a lot of money, and the gift is truly significant, not only in its size, but also in the potential of its impact for many years to come. This is what Stephanie, she's in charge of the learning, international learning at this Virginia Commonwealth University. She goes, the inspiring generosity of this anonymous alumni and their family will increase access to education abroad for these students, and it's going to help shape the rest of their lives and career. I think there is a benefit to going outside of the United States and learning about other cultures, about other people, and then coming back and uh, sharing that with your colleagues if you were to get a job of some kind. I think that once you leave the United States, you realize how awesome the United States is. It's kind of incredible. A lot of people who study abroad always come back. But yeah, this is $2.5 million to donate that and to not have your name attached to it. This is where I know it's authentic, and this person just did this out of the kindness of their heart. But he's anonymous, and we have no idea who donated that money, but a bunch of kids are going to get to go and study abroad. On the other side, let's talk about it. Alex Gino, he's this weird, creepy author of this book, and he's talking about how parental rights really anger me, and I'm just so sick of it. I hate that these parents have rights over their children. It just shouldn't be that way. I'll be back. Good morning. And if you're watching, go ahead and smash that like button. I so do appreciate it. We are going to be getting into Alex Gino. He's this weird author. He's kind of creepy. And I'm going to read a little bit of this book. So this book is one of the most challenged books of 2020. The American Library Association has said that this book specifically was the number one most challenged book in 2020. And I'm going to read a little bit of it. So the reason the reason why it's challenged is pretty clear to me. The content in there is very disturbing, and it's sexual in nature, and this is in your children's library, this is in the school libraries, this is in the library kids section. You want to know how I know that? Because I've seen it. Okay, you can't gaslight me. I've seen the books in the children's section at the Bloomington Public Library. I've seen the Unit 5 and District 87 checkout list, because you can FOIA those. Hey, what books were checked out between this month and that month? I've seen it. Genderqueer has been checked out multiple times. Books like this, it's called Melissa, which is kind of funny because he actually had to rename the book because he dead named the transgendered fourth grader, because that's what the book is all about. It's about this transgender fourth grader. And the book was originally called George or something like that. And he identifies as a girl named Melissa. So he had to retitle the book because he originally named the book George. but he dead named. So dead naming is where you refer to a transgender person by their biological and their birth name, and that's dead naming. So he actually dead named the character in the book, so he had to rename the book because it's so funny. Because even the leftists, even these people who believe in this nonsense, they can't even keep up with this. Okay, they can't keep up with the tranny logic. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about that. Plus, Matt Gaetz holding out along with a few of these Republicans. You need to know that this isn't like Matt Gaetz' fault. He's not a bad guy. He's not shutting down the government because, believe me, the mainstream news is going to continue to tell you that Matt Gaetz is big man bad because he's shutting down the government and he's holding out. He's holding out for good reason. So his main reason for holding out is because Kevin McCarthy, when he was campaigning to be the House Speaker, he was saying, yes, I'm going to be for these single subject bills. And if you're watching, go ahead, smash the like button, share this out with your friends, smash the like button right now if you're watching. But Kevin McCarthy said, I'm going to be for these single subject spending bills. Now, what's a single subject spending bill? Well, Matt Gaetz gives an example. When he was a freshman congressman, he's in Florida, he gets this bill, and there's two issues on it. There's voting on whether or not we should go into Yemen and start war, and then there's also increasing spend for farmers. Okay, so you're face to face with these two decisions, and you have to vote yes or no on this bill. It's a single bill, but there's two issues on it. So you might not agree with going to war in Yemen, but you might agree with giving farmers more money. So either way, you're kind of screwed. If you vote yes, then the farmers get their money like you want. If you vote no, then the farmers don't get the money, and you kind of win because you don't start a new war in Yemen or something like that, something crazy. So Matt Gaetz is really trying to push for these single subject spending bills. And there's a bill out there that says, hey, we're going to shift the makeup of Congress bills to shift them over to single subject bills. And the Democrats, they're obviously against that because then they can't squeeze in more funding for Ukraine that way. The Democrats are against it, so it's along party lines here, and they don't have enough Republican votes or they don't have enough Republican or Democrat votes to get that single subject spending bill passed. So the Republicans are holding out on that. They say, no, we're not going to pass these continued resolutions until we get in writing, until we get a bill passed that says that we're going to shift the process and we're going to start creating single subject spending bills rather than these huge omnibus bills. So that is what the Republicans are holding out on. Democrats in mainstream media, and I repeat myself there, they're going to say that Matt Gaetz and the like are against democracy and they're going to shut down the government. And how could they do this? No, this is actually democracy. Rubber stamping things and just going with the flow, that's not democracy. Having healthy debate and disagreeing with each other on things like single subject bills, I think is a good thing. This is democracy at work, much like at the beginning of the year when we were voting on a speaker, there were a few holdouts. That's democracy. That's truly democracy when you have debate and when you have people who aren't willing to just bend the knee. Okay, this is people having healthy debate. So we're going to be talking about that. Plus, how much money are we actually giving to Ukraine? $135 billion. If you had $135 billion, what would you spend it on? So $135 billion to Ukraine. That is how much money we have given to them in total. President Joe Biden is asking Congress for an additional $24 billion to Ukraine. The Republicans are holding out on this continued resolution. It's a CR, I guess, continuing resolution or whatever it is. There's a bunch of bills that aren't single subject bills, single subject spending bills. So you've got one bill that approves $6 billion to go to Ukraine. And then you've got in that same bill, $6 billion for the United States in disaster relief. So you might be for the disaster relief and spending money here in the United States on disaster relief, but you might be against sending more money, and likely you're against sending more money over to Ukraine. 85% of voters are against funding the war in Ukraine. That's just facts. Every single poll says that Americans largely are against spending more money in Ukraine. That's probably because we're spending money on things like, oh, I don't know, subsidizing small business in Ukraine and fertilizer and seeds for their farmers over there. And then we're also paying the salaries of all of their first responders. Yeah. So we're not spending it on war, right? But as long as it saves one Ukrainian life, then the spending is worth it. No. We're not saving any lives. We're not doing anything when it comes to saving Ukrainian lives in this war. We're spending it on subsidizing small businesses and propping up Amy's knitting business where she knits sweaters over in Ukraine. Yes, that's what we're spending it on. But $135 billion. What can you do with $135 billion? And I want to point this out. And I'm not saying that we should spend it on this stuff, but I'm saying that we could. We could build 6 border walls. 6 border walls. Then we could also fix the Flint water system 215 times over. So we could continue to fix that Flint water system 215 times. Then we could also give every single homeless veteran here in the United States $2 million, a check for $2 million cash. We could also provide $50 million checks to every single family that was devastated by those Maui wildfires. We could give a $50 million check to every household in Maui, Hawaii. $135 billion is a lot. Good morning. This is The Morning Buzz. You can see me live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. As you guys know, Scott Robbins is out. He's getting new equipment. He'll be back. He'll be back for Scott's Takes. That happens Monday morning at around 7:40 every month, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, about 7:40. But he's going to be back. He's just getting more equipment so he can continue to do the show with me on in the 7 o'clock hour. So he'll be back. Quick housekeeping note: if you guys want to go to the Back the Badge Fest, there's this guy. His name's Jared Neiman. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's kind of a big deal. He's a country singer. He's going to be in Paxton, Illinois for the Back the Badge Fest. This is a really good cause. So the 1078 Foundation and the Never Forgotten Services, they're excited to announce this headliner. His name is Jared Neiman. He's got a lot of like #1 hits. He's best known for hits like Lover Lover, Ghostwriter, Tequila Kisses. And really what this is, it's a fundraising event to try to build relationships between police officers and the community. So they're going to be taking that funding. But you can score a pair of tickets right now by texting the word BLUE, BLUE, to 309-451-9299. You can score a pair of tickets right now. If you want to win, text the word BLUE to 309-451-9299. It's Back the Blue Fed, or Back the Badge Fest on October 7th this year. So you have a chance to go to the festival. It's going to be this awesome festival with this amazing country singer, and it's all for a great cause. So text the word BLUE to 309-451-9299. Okay, I do want to get into this. This guy, his name is Alex Gino. And I know your head is going to explode because my head is going to explode if I talk about this a whole lot. But this really creepy author of this book, and the book is about a 4th grader who is about a little boy who believes he's a girl. His name is George, and he wants to go by Melissa now. This creepy author says, and I'm quoting him here, "Parental rights really anger me. And he's talking about you, of course, the families who are pushing back against these books that sexualize children. I'm talking about the 90 Hayworth parents that showed up to that school board meeting to get Sarah, that teacher, to involuntarily resign. Okay, there's a lot of parents out there who are against the sexualization of children, and don't let the mainstream fool you. Parents aren't for this crap. Alex Gino, he shared his degenerate views on Yahoo Entertainment. It was an interview that he did. And he said that parents' role in affirming their children's gender, And he voiced anger towards parents who stand in the way of children who identify as non-binary or transgender and don't affirm. So if you don't chop your daughter's breasts off, then you are abusing your child, and it really angers this Alex Gino fellow. So Alex Gino says this, and I'm quoting, "Parents' rights really anger me because what about human rights? People who are under 18 are human." And then he goes on, he says, "And if you're keeping information about the world from young people, you're leaving them less prepared to learn how to be in the world. I think it is fear that looks like anger." Um, and I think that this fear of adults generally, I think it's a fear of adults generally. So he's saying that you're scared and that you're transphobe and that you're homophobe or whatever. Adults are not great at knowing what's in the world. Kids are great at it. Okay, kids are constantly learning what's in the world and taking on new ideas. They learn who's in the world and they learn how people are in the world. So a bunch of McGurkin, but the lack of self awareness is truly appalling here. He's really trying to project his delusion onto parents. And any adult knows this. If you're an adult and you're listening, you know that children have no idea what they want. Okay, if you have ever encountered a child, which is pretty much every adult ever, you know that children have no idea what they want. So nice try on him, but no one's dumb enough to believe this nonsense. So he concludes in the interview, he says, "Many adults feel like they have already learned who should be in the world. And if someone goes against that notion of that, then they are somehow immoral. And there's a particular panic about showing that or immorality to young people." I don't know. So he's saying that, you think that it's immoral to be trans. Yeah. Yeah, this is immoral. Too bad for him. Most people don't take parenting advice from a sick, perverted psycho. Gino, he's a 45-year-old man, Alex Gino, and he identifies as non-binary. And he wrote this book called Melissa, which is kind of funny because it's about a kid named George, and he identifies as a girl named Melissa. Originally, the book was called George, I think, but then he changed it in 2021 to Melissa because he had dead named the book's protagonist George by titling the book George instead of Melissa. So the tranny logic is such nonsense that they can't even keep up with it. So he had to change the title of his book because he dead named the main protagonist. It's quite interesting. But some critics concerned with this bath scene. This is according to the Des Moines Register. There's a bathtub scene in this, and it's really quite weird how a 45-year-old man is talking about a fourth grader immersed in warm bath water, and he tried not to look between his leg, but there it was, bobbing right in front of her. So it's very odd. This guy is a sick pervert, and the American Library Association named this book Melissa as one of the most challenged books in 2020. This is a concern. They claimed that it was banned because of the LGBTQ content. No, 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 no. People pulled the book off of the shelves because of this line here. It's about that's child pornography. Like he's literally writing child porn, and then we're putting it on the shelves for children to read. So they're saying that it was banned because of the LGBT content and that it was conflicting with a religious viewpoint. No, that's not the reason why it was pulled off the shelf. Sorry. And I wonder why so many states are beginning to cut ties with the Library Association. This Library Association pretty much backed child pornography, and there's lots of states now that are saying, you know what, enough's enough. I'm done with the American Library Association. On the other side, we're going to be talking a little bit about Matt Gaetz and how he is holding out with other Republicans. And we're going to get into the DC drama next. check out the live stream. That's YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Rumble. Yes, we are going to be getting into Matt Gaetz and why he's holding out, folks, because not a lot of people, I mean, you're going to hear it in the mainstream today. They're going to sit there and they're going to say that Matt Gaetz is a terrible human being and he's anti-democracy because, and all of these other far-right Republicans are anti-democracy and they're holding out and they're going to shut down the government. And how could they? Relax, everything's going to be fine. To me, I think that a government shutdown sounds awesome. Less government? Yeah, let's do it. But the government may shut down next week, which will cause a lot of issues. I'll tell you about that on the other side, what could happen, and how that's going to affect the day to day. But don't worry, it's because Congress is, they're doing all they can to make sure that Ukraine is taken care of. So Biden, he wants $24 billion more in Ukraine spending. And a lot of these Republican holdouts, they're like, yo, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are not going to be spending more for Ukraine. And we want single subject spending bills. That's what this is all about. And Kevin McCarthy, I really like Kevin. And I'm glad that he's, at least listening to the right wing, to the more conservatives. Republicans of the party and at least trying to meet their demands as well. He ran on single subject spending bills. And that's what Matt Gaetz and these other Republicans want. They want single subject spending bills. That's it. That's all they want. And they're holding out on these continued resolutions because they include things like spending for Ukraine and spending for the United States. So, for example, there's a bill that they're supposed to continue, but they're not going to vote on it because it includes spending for Ukraine and the United States all within the same bill. So there's spending for U.S., I think it's $6 billion for U.S. disaster relief. And then they're spending for Ukraine, it's $6 billion or something like that. And it's all in the same bill. And the Republicans here, like Matt Gaetz, said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We want single subject spending bills, and we want to be able to vote on single subject spending bills moving forward. And you better make that happen, Kevin McCarthy. Otherwise, we're not voting for anything anymore. So Matt Gaetz isn't a terrible human being. He's just for single subject spending bills. And that is what Kevin McCarthy ran on, and he needs to fulfill that promise. Otherwise, we're going to be looking for a new House Speaker, which there's already talks of that possibly happening. So I'm going to be back on the other side, talking a little bit about that. Plus, Biden's team being forced to put these new protocols in place to prevent him from falling down. Straight up, they've got protocols in place to prevent Joe Biden from falling down. Good morning. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. Yeah, we were talking a lot about this Alex Gino character. He's this creepy author who's like 45 years old, and he writes about a transgender fourth grader. And I was telling you a little bit about what the book was talking about. So according to the Des Moines Register, some critics raised concern with a bath scene out of the book. And I'm going to just copy paste this right in here for you so you can read it with me. So the bath scene goes like this. She immersed her body, and he's talking about a boy, into warm water and tried not to think about what was between her legs. But there it was, bobbing right in front of her. This is disturbing because he's writing about a fourth grader. This entire book is called Melissa. It's about the main protagonist. His name is George, and he changes his name to Melissa because he believes that he's a girl. And it's kind of funny because the author actually had to rewrite the title of the book because he dead named the main protagonist by titling the book George. So he actually had to go back and change the title of the book because he dead named the main protagonist. See, these tranny ideas, they can't even keep up with that themselves. But this is a really disturbing, and I'll tell you why, because that's child pornography and it's illegal. And then we're dispersing that to kids in children's sections of public libraries and then also in school libraries. So there were a lot of critics about that specific part because that's child pornography. You're describing a scene with a child um, in a book. It's child pornography, and it should be illegal. But the American Association decided to side with this author. And here's the fact. I'll throw it up there on the screen. The American Association has also said that the book that I'm talking about here, Melissa is the title of it since 2021. It was called George or something like that, but he renamed the book. He retitled it. So funny. The American Library Association has also said that the book was the #1 most challenged book of 2020. So the American Library Association siding with this guy um, and not the critics who say, "Hey, this is, like, on the verge of, like, child pornography." They claimed that it was banned. It's not banned, it was just taken off the shelves from a couple of libraries, because the LGBTQ content. It's not because of that, it's literally I just detailed out what it says in there, and he's talking about a 4th grader in that situation. It's different when you have adults depicting sex scenes, okay? When you have children depicting sex scenes in this way, then it's considered child pornography. And especially when you disperse that imagery or those words to children, that's exposing children to what's called harmful content. Now, here in the state of Illinois, we have rules about this sort of thing, laws on the books about how you are not to provide sexually explicit content. And I don't know about you, but that kind of sounds sexually explicit to minors. So a lot of state libraries, Montana, Missouri, Texas, and local library in Midland, Texas, announced that they're leaving the American Library Association. At least 9 other states, Arizona, Georgia, Missouri, or Arizona, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Wyoming, they're demanding similar action, which is kind of interesting. So Illinois has demanded it. However, I don't think it's going to get passed. You have to pass that via state statute that you leave the American Library Association. So this comes as the ALA actually they hired this woman. She's a Marxist lesbian. And she's very open about that, and she leads the organization as of April of 2022. She expressed that she wanted to recenter children's library sections, on notions of queerness and prevent what she described as angry white mob parents from trying to block those efforts. So she's being very open and honest about it. She said that she wants to reimagine, recenter the focus of children's libraries to include notions of queerness. Okay, so very blatant about that. Someone should apologize to the ALA on behalf of parents who are getting in the way of its revolution. Okay, because that is exactly what libraries are for. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. Um, that is not what libraries are for. Okay, pushing this notion of queerness is not what libraries are for. But what do you expect from a Marxist? Of course, she's going to think that that is what the use of children's libraries is for. Um, their only hope for a revolution is to take control of our nation's children and destroy the family unit. She's a Marxist, so of course she's going to make this her life's goal, is to make children's libraries. She's being very honest about it. Children's libraries, a beacon for queerness, a place of queerness. So her name is Drabinski, is her name, the Marxist lesbian who's in charge of the ALA. And she has a very open socialist platform, and she has uh, posted many tweets, gave several interviews, how she described herself as being on labor's side, whatever that means. Um, so we're going to be chatting a little bit about this coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. But first, I want to talk about Matt Gaetz. I love this comment from Bob. in the comments section here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can see me, The Morning Buzz, Cat Peterson 929 on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel today. Bob, he says, she's Christophobic. And of course, he's referring to the recently elected woman. She's a lesbian Marxist. And I feel like I have to disclose that because she's so blatantly open about that. She was recently elected April of 2022. Her name is Drabinski. And she has come out and said that she wants to recenter children's libraries and children's sections within libraries on notions of queerness. So she wants to prevent, quote, angry white mob parents from trying to block their efforts of creating notions of queerness in children's libraries. So she was recently elected. She describes herself as a Marxist lesbian. And there's been a lot of states now that have wanted to cut ties with the Library Association. So states like Montana, Missouri, Texas, there was a local library in Midland, Texas, who announced that they are in fact leaving the American Library Association. Other states, including our own here in the state of Illinois, Louisiana, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Wyoming, Arizona, Georgia, demanding similar action. So there are calls here in the state of Illinois. I don't think that those calls are going to go anywhere. That we aren't going to be abandoning the American Library Association because that has to be done via the legislature, the state statute, where you cut ties with the American Library Association. But she's being very open and honest. She's telling you out loud that her goal is to recenter children's libraries around queerness, to make them beacons of queerness, I guess, whatever that means. And she wants to prevent angry white mob parents from trying to block the efforts of the ALA from sexualizing your children. Okay, so look, somebody should apologize to the ALA on behalf of parents who are getting in the way of its revolution. Somebody should apologize because that's exactly what libraries are for, not. I thought libraries were to learn. I don't understand why we have to push this radical LGBTQ agenda in libraries. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what else do you expect from a Marxist? It's very clear that their only hope for a revolution is to take control of the nation's children and to destroy the family unit. Okay, so that is their whole reason for existing. That is their revolution. They want to destroy the family unit. And what else? I mean, if she is elected and she's a Marxist, she's of course going to destroy children's innocence and destroy the family unit. Drabinski is her name. Drabinski ran for the position as an openly socialist on an openly socialist platform, and she's given several interviews. She says all kinds of things in tweets that are just completely insane and radical. In a letter to the ALA, the Montana State Library Commission. So they're one of those states that have broken away from the American Library Association. They stated that their decision to withdraw was made because their office forbids association with an organization led by a Marxist. So they just came out and said it. Look, lady, you're Marxist, and we are forbidding business with each other. We're not going to be tied, or we're cutting our ties with a Marxist. The ALA has been exerting its influence against efforts to ban sexually explicit content from libraries and to recommend dozens of LGBTQ books for minors. So there was this one book, Alex Gino, as I was telling you in the 7 o'clock hour. He's an author. He's a really creepy author who created this book, and it's about a fourth grader who believes that he is transgender. And there was a specific scene where it talks about this fourth grader's private parts in a bathtub, which is very bizarre. And content like that used to be called child pornography. Now we're calling it LGBTQism, which I don't understand. But there were critics, and they said, whoa, we're taking this off of the shelves because we can't allow this sexually explicit material into the hands of minors. It's wrong and it's against the law. Here in the state of Illinois, there's something called the Harmful Material Act or something like that, and it forbids adults giving sexually explicit material to children. And we're not following that law every single day. And if you don't believe me, go to the Bloomington Public Library, check out the shelves, go to the normal public library. I'm sure it's there. I've seen the books checked out at Unit 5 and District 87. I've looked at the checkout list, and students are continuing to check out these types of books. So I do want to shift gears. Let's talk about Matt Gaetz. What you need to know from that story that I just did, there are states that are saying enough is enough. We're leaving the American Library Association, which is a good thing. Now, Matt Gaetz, there's a lot of drama going on in DC, and quite frankly, I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with it or to really care. If I had the bandwidth like I did with the speaker vote at the beginning of this year, I would probably be on the side of Matt Gaetz, and I am mostly on the side of Matt Gaetz here because Matt Gaetz and all of these other Republicans, what they're trying to push for is what's called the single subject spending bills. Single subject spending bills. And Matt Gaetz, he actually went on Timcast. I think it was a podcast that he did, and he discussed how he was a freshman congressman, and he's a congressman out of Florida. And he said that these single subject spending bills are so important because when he is a freshman, he was tasked with a vote on a farm bill. Now, this farm bill also had this little caveat in there where he had to authorize war in Yemen in the same vote. So like there were two subjects, totally different subjects in this farm bill. And he was for the farm bill. He was for spending more money on agriculture and things like that. But he wasn't for the war in Yemen. So he was forced with a yes or no vote on these two issues in this one bill. And he said enough is enough of that. And he remembers that Kevin McCarthy, when he was running for House Speaker, he said that he was going to push for single subject spending bills. Now, fast forward to 2023, after Kevin McCarthy gains the speakership, he is siding with the Democrats, or he's at least trying to get the Republicans to concede this issue of the single subject spending bills. He's trying to get them to bend on that. And that's not right. As a speaker who ran on single subject spending bills, you should probably fulfill that promise. And if you're not going to fulfill it, and there's already talks of this, a new speaker needs to be elected. There needs to be some sort of legislation brought forward, or some sort of bill brought forward, or something like that, a call to elect a new speaker. So there's already whispers of that. Now, the government could shut down next week if they don't continue with these continuing resolutions. So the Republicans, these holdouts, say we're not going to continue with these resolutions because they provide funding for Ukraine and the United States in a single bill. Okay, so you can't include two subjects in a single bill. And we want single subject spending bills. And we need to sparse this out to where they're all single subject. And we're not going to vote on any of it until that's done. So, like I said, I don't really have the bandwidth to care about this DC drama so much. But I always have the bandwidth to go after CNN. So actually, Gaetz was being interviewed by somebody named Abby Phillip. She's on CNN here, and he actually goes after her, and it's quite hilarious. She was embarrassed for sure. Let's take a listen here. Here she is with Matt Gaetz, and she gets called out on not knowing her facts. So he has to fact check this lawyer on CNN, and he hates to do it to her. That's the thing, is he act like he's like, oh, do I really want to do this to this woman? I guess I'm gonna have to. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
Should note that you did vote against the defense appropriations bill this week.
No, I didn't.
The rule.
No, you're wrong. No,
the rule to
Abby, this is going to be a very embarrassing moment when the internet corrects you on this. I voted for the defense rule both times.
Well, I stand corrected. Congressman, appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She actually has to cut to commercial break because Matt Gaetz just blistering fact check just totally destroys her. Abby, this is going to be a very embarrassing moment for you when the internet corrects you on this, but I did vote for those appropriations bills, those defense appropriation bills this week. Ooh, ooh. So, as Politico reported, and this is Politico, Gates even attempted to work with Kevin McCarthy by going to his office with a plan. He goes to the office with Kevin McCarthy and he says, "Hey, here's my plan." And here it is out of Politico. I'm just going to read it. Gates had spent the week proving to McCarthy that the speaker could not pass a continuing resolution to keep the government temporarily open, no matter how much the speaker refashioned it to appease the hard right. So, Gates said, hey, we can pass this resolution where we keep it temporarily open. I think that they did, in fact, pass that just a couple of, or like 10 hours ago or something like that, where they passed a resolution to keep the government open temporarily until they can come to some sort of consensus on these single subject spending bills. That's really what it's all about, is these single subject spending bills, and the Republicans really want that, and the Democrats don't, and they're not bending. So the House has really abandoned the McCarthy CR strategy today, and he's embraced the Matt Gaetz strategy of single subject spending bills. Matt Gaetz said this on Thursday night on a Timcast podcast. Gaetz has been pushing for single subject spending bills since last November, along with 3 other bills. He also has bipartisan support on. The Florida Congressman, Matt Gaetz, had said of the single subject spending bills, something that worked well in Florida, a bill coming to the floor should only deal with one subject. Duh. When he was a freshman, he had to vote on this farm bill, like I said, and whether or not to authorize war in Yemen in the same vote, and that is not right. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this chaos unfolds in DC this week. There is a debate tonight, the GOP debate tonight. I've got to take a quick break, but we're going to talk about how the GOP candidates are preparing. Meanwhile, Joe Biden and his team is preparing for something totally different. Uh, they're preparing it's like a plan, it's a mission to keep Joe Biden upright. Quite literally, they're trying to get him to not embarrass himself in public by falling down again. So they've come up with a plan to try to help Joe Biden stay upright. And this was leaked to the media. Axios has the report. Axios, the article is titled, Biden's Team Don't Let Him Trip Mission. So we're going to be digging through that here on the Morning Buzz. See me live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. RT, I love it. Just give him a walker. Yeah, well, and I think that the best way for him to not fall and for him to stay upright is to stop the elder abuse and not drag him out for another presidential run. I told you guys before that I think that Joe Biden had a massive stroke somewhere between January 2017 and November 2017, somewhere in there. It's very clear by his face. It is dropping on one side, and you can tell really when you look at his earlobes. One earlobe looks like it's detached, and the other one looks like it's attached. And when you look at prior photos and videos of him to January of 2017, those earlobes are both detached. I've said this before. But yeah, Joe Biden, the best thing that they can do, and their mission, don't let Joe trip mission, the best thing they can do is get him out of this race. I don't want to see him get out of the race because I think that Donald Trump will destroy him. Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom, Donald Trump might have a little bit harder time. However, I think whoever is in that Democrat candidacy or whoever is nominated at this Chicago convention, we're hosting it here in Chicago. They have to elect somebody to be the nominee, and whoever that is, they're going to have a tough time because of things like inflation, because of things like the war in Ukraine. People are against the war in Ukraine and funding the war in Ukraine, despite all the Ukraine flags you might see on people's bumper stickers or whatever. 85% of voters are against funding the war in Ukraine. Bob, I really do want to bring this up. Kevin McCarthy, you say that he's a rhino. I wouldn't go as far as to say I do. There's a lot of things that I don't like about Kevin McCarthy. However, I think that it's important to not call him that just yet, because he has listened to the right wing of the party. Let's just call them what they are, the conservatives of the party, and he has listened to their demands. And he hasn't, you know, uh, it totally just ignored them. Okay. So he is working with Matt Gaetz despite what the mainstream media is telling you. I just told you about how that in that Politico piece, Politico even reported that Matt Gaetz went to his office with a plan, and they were talking about, hey, let's come up with a plan to continue our little fight here, and not shut down the government. Let's pass something so that way we can continue government and through October 1st. So they passed something temporarily that will get them by. So they are working together, despite what the mainstream is going to tell you. They're going to sit there and say that Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy hate each other and blah, blah, blah. That's just not true. They are continuing to work together, um, and come to some sort of middle ground, hopefully. Um, but I don't think that the Republicans should move on a lot of what they're pushing for, Matt Gaetz and others. I imagine Marjorie Taylor Greene is a part of that camp. I think there's about 7 Republicans, and they need those 7 votes. Otherwise, they can't get it passed. These continuing resolutions. And these continuing resolutions include things like Ukraine spending and these double use or triple use or quadruple use of different spending things in one bill. So they want single subject bills. And they said, we're not voting on anything until these things are parsed out and until we can vote on single subjects. So I don't think that they should bend on that. I think that single subject bills are something that should be bipartisan. Democrats, Republicans should both be for single use bills, spending bills. There, you should not, as a congressman, be faced with the decision of should we go to war in Yemen or should I vote yes on this bill to give the farmers what they want? But if I vote yes on this bill, then I'm also voting to go at war with Yemen. Right? A congressman should never have to be face to face with that decision. Um, of course, you're going to vote no on it, right? You'd have to vote no on that because you don't want to go to war with the country, right? Like these are totally different things, and they're shoving them all into one bill, and that is wrong. They should be single subject bills, and that is what the right is pushing for. And Kevin McCarthy ran on this. He said that he was going to push for single subject bills. Here we are. The time has come for Kevin McCarthy to prove himself and to get the Democrats. So he shouldn't be trying to really get the Republicans to concede and to go with what the Democrats want. He should be getting the Democrats to do what the Republicans want, which is the single subject spending bills. 135 billion dollars so far to Ukraine. That's a lot of money. If you guys are watching, like the program, if you think that that's a lot of money, like the show, if you think that that's an exorbitant amount of money, 135 billion dollars. I'm going to get into how what we could be spending that money on. And it's going to really drop your jaw. There's a lot of things that we could be spending that money on, but we're not. Things like, oh, I don't know, providing disaster relief to the families of Maui. Okay. We should be, I mean, $135 billion, I'm not kidding you, could be divvied up and given to Maui families, households. I think there's like 27,000 households in Maui. We could give $50 million per household, and with that 135 million or $1 billion. So yeah, that's a lot of money for a household. $50 million. Okay. That's what we could be using that money. And I'm not saying that we should use that money for that. But we could. That's what I'm saying. If you're watching the program, like the program, share this out with your normie friends. I do actually feel sorry for pedophile Joe, but have never liked him, even when he first started. He is very racist. Yeah. So in a way, you do kind of start to feel sorry for Joe Biden because there is elder abuse going on. They're dragging him out for yet another presidential campaign. However, you bring this up, pedophile Joe. The reason why people last as long as they do, and I've just noticed this, Joe Biden is lasting as long as he is, and he's in poor health, and yet he's not dying. The reason why is because there's just evil within inside of him. I truly believe that Joe Biden is an evil, evil man, and people that have that much evil and spite in their heart don't pass. They just don't. They'll continue to espouse evil and to do evil things, because it's more important than even life to them. Whew, Joe Biden. There's a big plan out there. And, I love it because there's going to be a GOP debate tonight. I don't think Donald Trump is going to participate in that debate. I don't blame him. The last debate was terrible. And, they're all playing checkers. Donald Trump is playing chess. He's not even in that same arena. When it comes to the polling, it's ridiculous how far ahead Donald Trump is of not only just the GOP Republican candidates here, the primary candidates, but also Joe Biden. He's like 10 points ahead in some polls. Some polls have Donald Trump 10 points ahead of even Joe Biden. Okay, so he didn't really need to participate in the debates. And not to mention, he tried to send a surrogate, his son, Donald Trump Jr., to the last debate, and Fox News shut him out of the spin room, wouldn't allow him to come into the spin room. And I mean, he got way more views on Tucker Carlson's Twitter interview than he would have ever gotten on the debate stage. So GOP candidates, they're preparing. They're going to probably talk about things like Ukraine, how, whether or not a man can be a woman. I'm sure they're going to tackle those issues, the cost of living. Meanwhile, we've got Joe Biden's team making sure their candidate is prepared for 2024 too, but prepared to not embarrass himself in public by falling down. So they're not preparing Joe Biden on topics like cost of living, Ukraine, things like that. No. They're preparing him to stand upright. They want to have a plan in place to keep him upright. And this has been leaked to the media, their plan to keep him upright. And Axios has the article. It's titled, Biden's team don't let him trip mission. This is hilarious. And folks, this is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can text me at 309-451-9299 or see me live in the studio, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Share this podcast out with your normie friends and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's Kat Peterson 929. It's real easy to subscribe. It's right there in the corner of the video. Just click on my face and then boom, automatically you're subscribed. Now, this plan. So I'm going to read it from the Axios report here, the article. They say, quote, some senior Democrats privately have been frustrated with Joe Biden's advance team for months, noting that the president often appears not to know which direction to go after he speaks at the podium. Often without context, Republicans have used video clips of Joe Biden looking confused about where to go after his speeches and has to raise further questions about his age. So I get it that in order to stay a corporate journalismer in good standing, that you have to shill for the Biden White House. But it's so silly to sit there and blame Republicans for sharing videos of Joe Biden falling down for Joe Biden falling down. Like they're trying to blame Republicans. Like, what? I can't help that Joe Biden actually fell down. Of course, I'm going to share that and raise questions about his age because Joe Biden fell down. And look, I'm sorry that Joe Biden is old and he doesn't know how gravity works and he forgot how gravity works. Okay, so it's not my fault. And they're like placing blame on Republicans for sharing the video. It's just wild. Why not just call a spade and say that Joe Biden is old and he doesn't know how gravity works or forgot how gravity works? So in order to steal the joy that it brings Republicans to share this content. I love sharing the content. Joe Biden falling off of his bicycle. I think it's pretty embarrassing. And they want to steal that joy it brings Republicans to share that kind of stuff out. This secret mission, there's a team of Joe Bideners, Biden people. They're creating this plan to make sure he stays upright. Okay, so this is the plan, and I'm not kidding here. It's been leaked to the media. Biden has been doing these exercises with a physical therapist for balance. They want to improve his balance. So this has been leaked to the media. He also switched to wearing just tennis shoes. So he's not going to be wearing like dress shoes with the slippery sole. I'm not sure if he's got Velcro laces or if he's got the actual laces. I'm not too sure about that one. I would imagine that he's going to need the Velcro laces. But The president of the United States also has to now use these short stairs for Air Force One. We saw that yesterday, actually, shortly after this Axios report came out that lays out the plan to keep Joe Biden upright. Literally within the hour that this plan gets leaked, he almost takes a tumble down Air Force One, like a bad tumble. Like he would have fell and his feet came out from underneath him. He would have fell and hit the back of his head if he didn't catch himself on the railing. Um, Look, I don't know Joey's doctor, but I'd be interested to see what kind of balance exercises he's doing. Now, Joe Biden's doctor has recommended balance exercises, and he's calling them maintenance or maneuvers. Unclear what these maneuvers are, but I can't wait to see Joe Biden attempt to put them into practice in public. Look, a more effective plan would be to put Joe Biden in a home and stop with the elder abuse. Okay, put him in a home and stop trying to get him to go out there and run for president. Joe Biden, of course, his team doesn't want that to happen. They don't want to stop the elder abuse because then they wouldn't have jobs. Then they wouldn't be lining their pockets with all kinds of money. So they're never going to stop the elder abuse. And, you know, somebody brought this up on the text line. They said, sometimes I feel bad for a pedophile, Joe. Well, you said it right there. Sometimes there's these people in the world, and I've just encountered this in life, and I don't know what it is, but there's people out there who last a very long time, and they tend to be very evil people. Joe Biden, there is a diary that his own daughter wrote about how he would inappropriately take showers with her. That is the scum of scum. If there's any truth to that at all, he's a scummy human being. And I've found that scummy human beings, they never want to go to Christ and they never want to go home because they won't be going home. Okay. And they avoid going home to Christ and they avoid dying because they'd rather stay here because they're spiteful and evil people. So, yes, I feel bad for Joe because I don't think anybody should go through elder abuse. Um, However, we have to keep it into context here that Joe Biden is an evil, evil man. And what he's been doing, specifically when it comes to Ukraine, and I'll get to that here in just a little bit, is evil. I mean, there's nothing else to it. $135 billion so far, and he's asking for another $24 billion. He's robbing you. And we're giving our money to corrupt people. So the US officials, they've announced that they've started investigating several criminal cases involving non-military aid. So 170 Ukrainian officials, some including these high-ranking military officials, have been charged in corruption cases. And these crimes include things like bribery, embezzlement. So we're giving money to these Ukraine government officials, and these Ukraine government officials, how do they repay the United States? By giving all of this money. They do things like, embezzling and bribery and committing these corruption crimes. So I'm going to be back here on the Morning Buzz. I'm going to tell you what we could be spending $135 billion on instead of sending it to Ukraine officials who are going to do crimes with that money. I just like this comment. That's a great comment. Yes, Becky, Democrats are scum. Yes. RT, they can investigate all they want. It makes no difference until they actually prosecute these people for their wrongdoing. Yeah, that's one thing too. Is so I read that the U.S. officials are actually investigating these 170, and yes, I said 170 Ukraine officials for things like embezzlement, bribery, corruption, crimes. It doesn't really make a difference if you're investigating them. You can say you're investigating them, and then if you're not actually prosecuting them, then it really makes no difference. Now, a couple of people or a couple of industries, I guess, oligarchs are going to be making a lot of money. BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase. So they've actually got something set up in Ukraine right now, and it's called a fund of reconstruction. Look, they're going to be benefiting from all of this money that we send over to Ukraine. Americans, we're not against a fight. If it's a good fight, we love a good fight, actually. And it's been proven in our history that if that fight is righteous, we will fight it. But this is not a righteous fight because there are no righteous people involved. And it's not our job. Fighting the British, that made sense. We wanted to have our own country. That was a righteous cause. World War II, we got involved after Pearl Harbor. Righteous. This, we're sending our money to people who are willing to embezzle it and bribe with it and do all kinds of shady crap with it. Okay, so we we are not fighting a righteous fight here by sending money to Ukraine. We're not spending it on Ukrainian lives. We're defending Ukraine. We're spending it on fertilizer and seeds for their farmers. We're spending it on their salaries for those first responders. We're spending it on Sally's knitting business in Ukraine. Okay. So this is not a good fight. $135 billion to Ukraine. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. Bob, but Democrats run the DOJ. Yes, that is why we will never see any true prosecutions against these Ukrainian officials who are being investigated for corruption cases. As RT pointed out, there's no true. It doesn't really make a difference at all if there is no prosecution. Europe needs to step up. It's their backyard. So yeah, Europe should step up. But here's the thing, isn't this wild? Zelensky actually came out in The Economist, and I encourage you to go read that interview. So Zelensky came out in The Economist, and he said, and I'm kind of quoting here, um, paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing. He said that you guys better continue to give us money, otherwise, these Ukrainian refugees, people who have sought asylum in your country, might just do acts of terrorism. So I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, there's no telling what they'll do. I have no idea what they'll do if you betray Ukraine and you stop giving money. So, in a sense, I understand what you're saying here that Europe needs to step up. But also, if I was in charge of Europe's purse and the purse strings there in Europe, after Zelensky makes a comment like that and threatens our country with terrorism, uh, then I would probably be pretty hesitant to give any more money to this guy. uh, uh, don't believe me, read the Economist interview. It's insane that he came out and he goes, yeah, I don't know what these Ukrainian refugees are going to do if you guys stop giving us money. Like, wild. And he's not the only one who says things like similar to that nature where, he's threatening these countries if they don't give him money. The military spokesperson who was transgender, and I talked about this, Sarah Ashton Cirillo, he was a transgender guy. He's a military spokesman. He actually put Americans on this hit list, Italians on this hit list, reporters on this hit list, people who have been critical of the funding of Ukraine. Okay. And sending funds over there, which we now know, according to these investigations, we were right. Okay. That this funding is, in fact, being used for shady stuff. Embezzlement, bribery. 170 Ukrainian officials are being investigated by our own government. So this isn't just cats saying, oh, yeah, well, there's shady things going on and they're laundering money. No, actually, they're laundering money, and the U.S. officials here in the United States are currently investigating that. But yet we still have it in these bills that we're going to send over $6 billion here, $6 billion there, $24 billion there. We still have it in these bills, although we're currently investigating them, which makes zero sense to me. If there's a pending investigation, which there is, we should probably wait until there's charges or that investigation is complete before we start sending more money. Just a thought. But we had this trans-military spokesman, Ashton Cirillo, and he put Americans, Italians, reporters who were critical of the funding of Ukraine and the funding of this war on this hit list. And he said he was going to hunt down these individuals and kill them. Okay, so that alone should halt any kind of spending. If you have an American on there on that hit list, which we did, yeah, I wouldn't send another dime. There's no reason why we should be sending a dime. Love this comment here on the live stream. You can see me live in studio, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Bob, he says, implying terrorist activity. Such a nice guy that Zelensky is. Yeah. So This is the biggest news story, I think, of all time. We have the president of Ukraine, uh, Zelensky, here doing an interview in The Economist, and he talks about how these Ukrainians fled to Western Europe and took up asylum there, and how he was grateful that these Ukrainians had a place to go to flee the war. Okay. And then he says something completely just odd, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. It's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Zelensky says something to the effect that, he doesn't know what these refugee Ukrainians will do if Europe stops funding Ukraine in this war and in this fight. He goes, I don't know what these Ukrainians will do if they find out that Europe betrayed Ukraine. What? So are you implying that these asylees, these refugees of the Ukrainian war, are going to start burning down buildings and start performing acts of terrorism? Is that what you're saying, Zelensky? I don't know. He's not necessarily a nice guy. Okay. Uh, and before we took the break, I was going to tell you what we could be spending the $135 billion to Ukraine on. With that money, we could be building 6 border walls. And I'm saying we could do this. I'm not saying we should, but we could build 6 border walls. 6. We could fix Flint, Michigan's water system 215 times over. We could give every single homeless veteran here in the United States $2 million. $2 million. We could make homeless people millionaires. We could even provide $50 million checks to every single family in Maui who were devastated by those wildfires. We could do it because I think there's like 27,000 households, and you divide that out, it's like $50 million checks per household. Like, wow, that's what we could be doing with this money. But instead, we're giving it to Ukraine, and we're not even giving it to Ukraine for defense purposes. No, 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 no. We're giving it to them for subsidizing small businesses. We're giving it to them for their farmers to buy fertilizers and seeds. We're also giving it to them to pay the salaries of 57,000 first responders. So this is far from providing military relief and saving Ukrainian lives. Okay, we're not saving lives. We're propping up their economy with our money. We're making them the 51st state of the United States. And this is the problem with war. When people say we have to go and defend Ukraine, what they really mean is more money from the United States. And you never get to stop paying taxes. Okay. You never get to stop paying taxes, but your government might get shut down. So at the end of the day, we've got these people in Congress. Matt Gaetz is kind of leading them, and he's saying, look, we need to cut down spending, and we need to at the very least, push for single subject spending bills, which means that we only look at one subject at a time. And that is the thing that Matt Gaetz and these other Republicans in the House want. Mainstream media, Democrats, people are going to sit there and say that Matt Gaetz is against democracy. How could he do this? He's pro shutting the government down. And really what this is, it's actually so pro-democracy, having a debate, fighting this out, not coming to an agreement. That's actually democracy working. And we saw that at the beginning of this year when we couldn't come to an agreement on a speaker. People said the same thing. They were looking at a government shutdown back then too. Never happened. I don't think it's going to happen here either, but they're saying that there's going to be a government shutdown, which isn't even that big of a deal. I'll get to, what that might look like, a government shutdown, that might look like for you here. I've got it from the AP Associated Press. So it could furlough millions of federal employees. Great. I think there's too much bloat going on anyway. I think we pay them way too much anyway. Furlough, which I don't know if that means that we're going to continue to pay them. Now, this is bad. The military, it would leave the military without pay. It would disrupt air travel. There's a couple of other things too. Basically, nobody gets paid. That's essentially what this federal shutdown would be. And I think that these Republicans are right in that they're holding and they're not moving. They're really dead set on this single subject spending bill, and we should all be for single subject spending bills. That's not really a bipartisan issue. It's like pretty. It's pretty. I'm surprised that it doesn't exist already. And Kevin McCarthy, he actually ran when he was trying to get the House speakership. He ran on, hey, you know, if you elect me as the House Speaker, I will make sure that we get it to where we vote on single subject spending bills and we don't include this random nonsense like $6 billion to Ukraine in a bill that looks to provide disaster relief to those in Maui. We're not going to also slip in other fun, like we're going to stay on single subject. He ran on that, so now he's face to face with the decision and the choice of getting these single subject bills passed. So I do want to also chat a little bit about this story. Trump lawyers asking this DC judge to recuse herself, and they are also slamming the DOJ for this unconstitutional gag order. So Donald Trump has this gag order placed on him, which is totally unconstitutional. It's silencing him, and really it's censorship. So the order would bar Trump from speaking out against witnesses, lawyers, and anyone else involved in this federal 2020 election case that Jack Smith has got against Donald Trump. And the Trump team has asked Chutkan to remove herself, and they and then I think that she should remove herself because she's made several comments against the former president. She's very clearly biased against the president. I think she even has a mug that says something to the effect of, screw Donald Trump or something like that. Like she's an extreme leftist, and she should really recuse herself if she um, had any kind of moral or any kind of ethics or really took pride in being a judge. But she's not recusing herself. And Jack Smith, he totally dismissed the Trump team's concern about her being biased towards Trump. And now we've got the Trump team accusing of the prosecution here, Jack Smith, of trying to poison Trump's defense. And they're slamming him by slamming the prosecution, Jack Smith and his little acolytes, for asking the court to take this extraordinary step in stripping President Trump of his First Amendment freedoms during the most important months of his campaign here. Okay, so yes, he takes to Truth Social. He posts things that are inflammatory. I won't say that they're not inflammatory. Of course, they're inflammatory. I'm not going to say that they're false, but even if they were false, really doesn't matter. You can print false and inflammatory things. That's protected under your free speech. Um, Duh. And none of what he's posted, there is no evidence to suggest that he has intimidated anyone, but yet they're still trying to place this gag order on him, and they're saying that he's intimidating people on Truth Social. Okay. So Chutkan, she set Trump's trial date, and you tell me if this is bias or not. She set his trial date for Super Tuesday, the day before Super Tuesday, which is probably the most important day within the Republican primary. So, but Trump, he has tried to uh, appeal this decision to have that trial date moved back. He said that it's election interference. Yeah, it's election interference what they're doing. I do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show here. If you're watching online, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me there. Cat Peterson 929 is the YouTube channel. You can subscribe today. I'll be back. No, Bob, you are always welcome to comment. I think that you have really great comments. So does RT. You guys have really great comments, and I appreciate you guys commenting. RT, he says, the Maui thing should be investigated because there is way too many abnormalities, like the cars looking like they were incinerated. Yeah, among other things. And there was places right next to them that nothing happened to. Yeah. So you're talking about Oprah Winfrey or Oprah? I think it was Oprah. Her mansion not being touched. There were plenty of millionaires who lived in Maui, had houses in Maui, went untouched, whereas the rest of the island burned to the ground. Unless you have somebody watering things down or digging a drench. Uh, so it's yeah. So yeah, that sort of thing doesn't happen in wildfires. It should have taken out their houses according to the science, and it doesn't happen unless you dug a trench or watered around those houses. Um, you're so right. And, I've brought stories here before. There was one story that I remember very vividly about a man and his family and how he drove them to the edge of the Maui, and they wanted to drive over this county line. And there were barricades. So they were met with barricades and state officials, government officials, and the government officials were telling them to turn around, which was quite incredible. They said, "Turn around." And he said, "No way, I'm not going to be turning around. My family is in the car, and you're literally directing us towards the fire. That's not happening." So he drove around the barricades and wound up saving his entire family. And he said that people did drive back into the fire. They listened to the government officials and they drove back into the fire, which is very odd. I don't know why you wouldn't allow people to leave. Now, a lot of people didn't get the chance to leave because they weren't warned properly. There was a siren that should have been sounded by the government, but they didn't sound the siren to let people know that there was a fire. The guy that was in charge of sounding the siren claimed that he didn't sound the siren because he was afraid that people would go up towards this mountain on the other side, because typically when you sound the siren, it's because of a tsunami situation and people go to high ground. Here's the thing. People actually went to high ground, on that side of the mountain, and their lives were saved. So either way, if you would have sounded the siren and people were going to that side of the mountain to get up on high ground, they probably would have made it, out of the fire, and they would have survived. Okay, so, so there was that issue. There was also the issue of the guy in charge of the water. He didn't uh, fill the fire hydrants for the firefighters, so the firefighters couldn't fight the fires because there was no water in the fire hydrants. He was supposed to release the water reservoir, and he didn't do that. And then on top of it all, the start of the fire was very odd. So you have these electric power lines. Hawaii Energy, uh, they were in charge of de-electrifying those power lines. The weather services there told them multiple times, "Hey, the conditions are favorable for a hurricane. You're going to have to de-electrify these power lines." Now, Hawaii Energy is claiming that they didn't have the bandwidth or the infrastructure to de-electrify those power lines. And I believe it because Hawaii at this time was trying to shift all of their infrastructure to be solely wind and solar, to have their electric grid based off wind and solar. And they wanted to be the first state to do it. So they didn't keep up with the infrastructure that would allow them to de-electrify the power lines, which I find interesting. And then on top of that, right, you have the power lines come down. Okay, so why did it start the fire? Why did it start such a massive fire? This electric line coming down. It's because they get rid of things like controlled burns. So you have all of this native grassland. And these are professors. These are people who are in the area that are not left or are not right. Uh, and by any means, these are leftist professors who have said that, they've allowed the grasslands to go completely amok there. And this brush, it's dead. They're non-native grasslands that have just completely run amok, and they were set on fire when these power lines came down. And the reason for that is because of these policies put in place to where they get rid of things like controlled burns. The reason why leftists don't like controlled burns is because of the carbon dioxide it releases into the air or whatever, the burning of the grass. So they think it's bad for the planet, although actually it prevents things like wildfires, which are astronomically bad for the planet, because it's a massive event. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of things there, and RT, thank you for pointing that out. We are back. Let's continue with our conversation. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. Good morning. This is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so do appreciate it. You can check the podcast out on cities929.com. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's Kat Peterson at 929. And you can subscribe to the channel today. That would really help me out. Now, one more thing before I want to wrap up today's show. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Joe Biden's plan here from his team, and it's called the Mission to Don't Let Him Trip. Okay, so this was actually released via Axios, and they talk about how Joe Biden and his team, they're looking for solutions to try to keep him upright. And here it is. Here's the solutions they propose. Biden has been doing exercises to improve his balance with his physical therapist. Okay. He's also switched to just tennis shoes to avoid slipping. Okay. And then the president of the United States, they're going to be using these shorter stairs on Air Force One. So he's not going to use the long stairs to get out of Air Force One. He's going to be using the short stairs. And I've said this multiple times, and I'm going to say it again because I think that my theory is right. Joe Biden possibly had a stroke, and I've got the timeline down because I've sifted through the video, and I think that this is between January 2017 to November of 2017 is where he had that stroke, that massive stroke. And it's clear videos, photos of him prior to January 2017, he has a different appearance. And I would encourage you to look at his earlobes. I know, looking at Joe Biden's earlobes. There's one attached earlobe, and then there's one detached earlobe after January 2017, after the inauguration of President Donald Trump. You see this. So, maybe he had the massive stroke because Donald Trump got elected to the presidency. Who knows? But in 2017, he's got this like side that droops down. And I don't know if they're hiding, they haven't released his medical records. If they're hiding this massive stroke that he might have had in 2017. But that would be a real shame if they did. The American people deserve to know if their president is healthy. He has had brain aneurysms before. Brain aneurysms, if you have them, you're more likely to have a stroke, from what I hear. I'm not a doctor, but logically speaking, I think that it's very plausible that he had a stroke. A lot of people have suggested that he is in a skin suit because his appearance changed so much. That's a conspiracy theory out there. I think my theory is pretty good. I think that he might have had a stroke. Either way, the best solution for Joe Biden's team is to get him to stop tripping, is to put him in a home of some kind and to stop throwing him out there for a presidential run. Okay. You guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. I love you. We'll do it again all tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Up after me, it's Glenn Beck. Then it's Dan Bongino, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and then Markley, Van Camp, and Robbins. Bye-bye. Love you.